All right. So today we're taking a temperature on everything that has happened in this past week. So our check-in is going to be who you are and just how you're doing. And that could be whatever you feel like you want to share. And then as we get to our updates, if there are things that you feel like that this group should be doing or could be doing around these things that we're checking in about, that'll be the time for you to bring that up. And then we're going to go into reflecting on the reparations. And depending on how many people come, we may or may not need all of this time, but we'll kind of go through that. And Rebecca, what we had done last meeting was to watch the W. Kamau Bell documentary on reparations. I'm not sure if you've seen that, but you can definitely go back and take a look at it. But we're going to be discussing that for a bit. And then we have a 6-prong initiative that we're working on that involves Black trans lives, Black women, children and food scarcity, voter suppression, police reform, and I always forget the sixth one. Help me.
And health disparities.
It wasn't health disparities. It was something else. But we have 6 prongs. And so we'll go into updates because now that we've done a lot of the learning and we're still learning as we go along, that's part of our tenet is that before we reach out to groups to partner or prepare ourselves, that we're going to do some of our own learning on our end. And so everybody in the group has taken on different initiatives that they feel very passionate about, that we've come to a conclusion that this is what we want to work on. So that's where we are. So agreements, just so that you, we try to maintain a safe space. I'll start if we could popcorn these out. It's okay to respectfully disagree. It is not okay to blame, shame yourself or others.
Aware of intent and impact.
Practice self-care. Take a break when needed and try to come back to the discussion.
Practice both and thinking.
Maintain confidentiality.
Notice your process and your content. Don't manipulate the situation.
Lean into discomfort and take risks. Try on a new idea.
Approach this work with a beginner's mind.
And mind your thoughts. So if there's anything that anybody in the group feels like they need today, especially in light of everything that's going on, to feel safe in this space, please let me know now and we can add that to our list of agreements. And if there's anything you have a question about, you can definitely ask those questions as well.
I appreciate these agreements.
Thank you. Rebecca, we're okay?
We're okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so going back to the question, taking a temperature. Asian American Pacific Islander violence, Atlanta shootings, the Boulder shootings, and everything else that has gone on in the world this week. How are you doing, and what would you like to bring to the forefront?
Okay, I'll go first because I get nervous. I'll just get it over with. My name is Tatiana. I actually was, I love that we're going to talk about what we watched last week because I will admit I have a kind of a crush on W. Kamau Bell, which is a little bit, feels weird to me to say, but I have a feeling about him that I don't usually feel for the gentlemen's. So it's like, I just like him. It's like, I like watching him. What is he gonna say? It's just like, oh my God. Anyway, and then I'm probably thinking about that because everything else is so awful. Like, I don't even know what to say about him.
That's what he brings to the table, is everything's so awful and he still makes you feel okay.
Yeah. Yeah. he reminds me of, that there's learning all the time, and to learn and get better. And that guy, he takes risks. He takes real risks and has conversations that are just so guts. I don't know. I just admire it. And which is helpful for time, like from what happened last week in Georgia and what happened yesterday in Colorado, and like how can my soul deal with that? And then I look, he's like an example. I'm like, oh well, look what he does. And I just find it so, I'm just grateful for this group, for him, and I feel horrible for all those souls.
Thank you, Tatiana. You want to call on somebody?
Sara?
Thanks. The Atlanta shooting has brought up stuff for me because in my immediate family of origin, both my brother and my father were violent towards me, and then my father has been violent towards my stepmom, etc. So, I have a big charge around violence against women, and for the longest time I thought that rape should be considered a hate crime most of the time because it's attacking a specific gender. So around the Atlanta shootings, there was this thing of like, is it a hate crime or not? Is it a hate crime because they're Asian? And right away I'm like, they're also women. They're also women. This could have a lot to do with their being female. And like Jake and I had a misunderstanding around, something I was saying about what I had read, and I just realized I had this big charge around not dismissing the fact that it's femicide as well as being racist. And I was using misogyny, and then I realized, that the word femicide applies here. And within my extended family now, like an in-law, there was a female relative of an in-law of mine who was probably murdered by her ex-boyfriend, and that like isn't being talked about and stuff. And having worked in women's health and stuff, I just am very tuned in to violence against women, and in this case, like the double whammy of otherizing these people because of race and class and work position and xenophobia, and I've been active against gun violence before too, and that's a big issue in healthcare also. So it's definitely had an impact on me.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks.
You want to call on the next person?
Fiona.
I apologize for having this weird lighting. It probably looks like I'm in a disco. Yeah, this week has been like a few things have come up for me. I have not been reading or listening to the news because I can't handle it if I do. I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, I had to take some anti-anxiety pills. It's just not good for my mental health. So I hear about the news through others. So I heard about the news of the Atlanta shooting that on Wednesday evening. Yeah, and it's been a really interesting week because there's just like a lot of things that have been coming up for me. feelings around gun violence. People in England don't have guns. There are not guns. And it's just so normalized here that we're like, oh yeah, you can just go buy a gun. So that comes up for me a lot. And I've started working with a coach, which is amazing. And I actually met her because I was doing a workshop on race and equity. And she's sort of directed me towards some resources. So I've been listening to these podcasts and stuff. And I've been thinking more and more about abolition of the police, of the prison industrial complex, and just how all of these things are kind of tied together. There's no restorative justice, and not that these people that are killing should not face consequences, but I don't know. Yeah, so I've been sort of like dreaming about a world without police and without guns and without prisons. And so far as like racial justice work, I feel like I'm getting very interested in that, and it's sort of tied into defund the police, right? Because we can't just defund the police without something to replace that. And like, how do we replace that with something really that, who knows when it will happen, but anything can happen, right? We didn't know we would spend a year dealing with the pandemic, and in a way, so anyway, I'm kind of all over the place, but yeah. And yesterday, like, I don't go out very much at all. And yesterday I was doing a big shopping for my house at Berkeley Bowl. And probably most people that are in the Bay Area have shopped at Berkeley Bowl, right? It's like such a great store. And I was just seeing like how many people there were of, I don't know, I even know what the politically correct term is, but Asian folks. And I was just sort of seeing, like, I think one of the questions that was on our agenda was, it's for Friday actually, because in our anti-racist group, we're going to talk about what happened in Atlanta also. And one of the questions was, as anti-racists that are really looking at anti-Black racism, how have we been blind to anti-Asian racism? And I was just in the store like, I have all these biases and ideas and stereotypes going around, which we all do about all kinds of things. And I haven't really addressed it. So that was just trippy. Like, it, I'm going to say this because I feel like I'm in a safe space, but there was an Asian woman who was dressed very kind of super sexy. And it went through my mind, I bet she's a sex worker. And so those women that were killed was by this man who was saying he was a sex addict, and his solution was to obliterate these sex workers. I don't know if that's come out in the news, if they were sex workers or not, but that's what he was saying, right? That they were his temptation, and he was going to get rid of his temptation by destroying it. So that's been up for me too, just looking at how I haven't really dug into my unconscious bias and all the stories and my own, it's not willful anti-Asian racism. I think it's just, there's stuff that has been programmed into me, like, just like any racism. Yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and thank you for feeling safe enough to bring that to the group, because I think that is something that has been coming up for lots of people. And our last tenet on these agreements is to mind your blind spot. So thank you for being brave. Who would you like to call on?
Thanks. Linda.
Thank you, Fiona. When I saw your question, when you sent it out today, Paula, I just, it was immediate. I feel very sad, obviously, for people who lost their lives and their families. And very quickly after that, I feel so disgusted with our country and on two fronts. One is the guns. Okay. Dianne Feinstein has been fighting against assault weapons for decades, and we just have not made any progress. And then I'll never forget Sandy Hook and my favorite president, Barack Obama, and how beautifully he handled that and how powerfully he went after gun legislation and couldn't get it done. Even after Sandy Hook, 28 people, most of whom were children, as you know, couldn't get it done. So it's like, what on earth is it going to take? Clearly, I don't know. So I'm disgusted about that. And the other thing is that when the police officer made a statement, he didn't seem like he was the police chief, but some police officer,
He was
white
a
police
He was
officer.
a spokesperson for the
Okay.
department.
But he was in a blue uniform, made the statement about the Atlanta shooter, that this guy was really at its wit's end and he just had a bad day. And that's what he did at the end of his bad day. It's like, really? Can you imagine what would have been said or done if the shooter was a person of color? It's like, it's to me, and then I'll stop. Is there any learning? And I think the same thing about Cuomo. It's like Governor Cuomo, I'm going, okay, you didn't pay any attention to the Me Too movement? And you didn't learn anything from that? I
No,
mean,
because he didn't have to.
well, yeah, I guess, that's, they didn't have to. Thank you, Tom. You're right. But it's just like, I don't know. So that's me. Rebecca, would you like to go?
Sure. Yeah, so I couldn't watch the news for a long time because I get I have pretty bad anxiety that like is well managed, but things just bring it up to like a debilitating level. So for a long time, I just had the privilege of putting my head in the sand. And then eventually I was able to bring myself to do the like CNN headlines. And that's where I've been at for like the past year. Okay, I need to be an engaged member of society. I will at least like read headlines on every single thing and I will click on things I feel like I can tolerate. And I've made really good progress and I've read most stories most months. And this past week, I was like, oh no, I'm back to head in the sand. It just was too much, like again and again and again. And it's not that I can't process it on my own, but what it's brought up, just the series one after the other, is my kids are 8.5 and 10.5. My daughter has a ton of special needs. And it's like, what is this world going to be for them? It's just, I just go like black and white, like a lot of hope for the future, or just everything is just going to hell in a handbasket. And that's pretty much where I've been with this week. Like friends that, just like when this past summer, when the BLM movement was really like getting all this extra steam, I feel like all my Asian friends on social media are just like, can everybody stop reaching out to me? Like, this is too much. Like, I'm exhausted by the outreach. Where were you, like, the rest of my life before this? And it just brought up for me, like, the levels of ignorance I have around certain things. Like when the term BIPOC came around, I was like, why doesn't this include Asian people? Like, I always figured, like, put Asian people and people of color. To me growing up, I'm like, these are all what I would look at as communities that I've seen racism against. So I still don't completely understand it, and maybe there's another area for learning. But I've seen it time and time again, every place that I've lived except for Portland, how people have been marginalized, and things that have to do with sexual assault definitely bring up, I mean, have to do with things like attacks on a sex worker, bring up like old traumas. So that's just, all of that's really hard, but that's where the fear for my kids come up, because I have a lot of fear for my daughter on like, it was hard enough for me being somebody who is neurotypical but an addict, putting myself in scary situations where scary things can happen. What's it going to be for her? Maybe she will be one of those people, you know. So all of that is really hard. I don't have a lot of hope for change in my lifetime, and makes it hard to want to take the like incremental steps that have to be taken if the arc is going to bend towards justice, you know.
Thank you,
So,
Rebecca.
Tom?
Oh boy. I'm in a room with 7 women.
As usual.
I grew up evangelical. My freshman year in college was at Oral Roberts University. I listened to so many people talk about how girls shouldn't wear those skirts and how this shouldn't happen and that shouldn't happen. And my head is about to explode with this bullshit around the fact that Brett Stevens wrote a thing in the New York Times today, which, you know, I have a problem with Brett Stevens anyway. But that was about the fact that it wasn't an, you know, it's convenient to call it Asian racism and not sex because he said it was about sex. And I'm like, well, did it even cross your mind that those two things are in sync in this situation, and the entire plugging in of these people to one or the other? And I mean, and then Linda pulls in Cuomo, and can I can I just go hide for a while? I don't get any of it, and I find it desperately upsetting.
Thank you.
And you know, and I was late because I came from a meeting with a dear friend of mine who I've worked with for a long time. I did a film about him. He's a bronze sculptor in Sonoma, and we're talking about a project he's working on about creating this bronze sculpture for a collie dog in Texas because it's mascot for this thing or that. And I'm just like, my head's about to explode with the irrelevance of the conversation we're having, that I'm then coming back to this. So hi,
That is
I'm glad y'all are here.
of escapism, artisan, and capitalism smashed up together is the bronze sculpture of a collie. Thank you for sharing, Tom, and thank you for feeling safe enough in this female space today.
Really appreciate
The most safe I feel.
I'm sure you're here with your feminine spirit, as you usually are, sir. So, I guess that leaves me, and I'm somewhere sandwiched in between Fiona and Rebecca, and then the minutia of all of everything else. In that I too have checked out. There is something in the air, and has been for the last 2 weeks, that has caused me to just check out. Like, I just don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to deal. I don't want to go out in public. I need sun, but I'm not going out to get sun, because I'm just like, there's something that is an energy field that is out in the universe right now that I'm like, something's off, something's not right. And I'm just, I don't know, I'm off. And I don't know what that is, but what I know to be true is that all of these things are unfolding in that space. And, you know, I have family in Colorado. You know, I would spend my summers in Denver with my grandmother, and we'd always go up to Boulder. And just thinking about, like, you know, with the not the information superhighways, but, you know, highways are super highways now. doesn't take long. Like it used to take like it was a day trip to go to Boulder from Denver. And now it's just like you go there just to commute. And so my uncles and aunts are always there. King Super is one of our favorite stores. It has been since my grandmother. And so it was like, wow, when they read the names, I literally was listening to, is any of my family there, even though they all live in Denver. I was listening for, were any of them there today? So that brought it home in a different way for me. And then with the Atlanta shootings, that was very surreal for me. And I think the sandwiching between the Fiona and the Rebecca stories is that, I spent yesterday counseling a couple of one, an alumni student who is getting ready to head off to college, who is doing racial justice work and is um, really overwhelmed with the anxiety of being a teenager and being Black in Piedmont, California, and everything that she's up against there, being female, um, being in a very strict religious household, and balancing that, but then also balancing that with um, understanding that people are people, and they all deserve unconditional love, but then just battling with going to Rebecca and the BIPOC uh, conversation with having an awakening around noticing levels of pain within different cultures and communities. And part of that is what I was trying to work through for myself and explaining it to her, was that we don't know everybody's story. History has not given us everything that we need to understand the pain of every culture. And looking for my blind spots in that. Like I talk to Rabbi Lezak often about that with conversations with Judaism and with I want to know more, but I feel like every time I ask a question, it may be considered anti-Semitic.
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine that's the way that people who are on their path to understand the Black experience are coming up against that. What we're up against with, I think, the Asian American Pacific Islander experience is that it is its own diaspora. And when we try to fit all of it in a box that they're all having this similar experience, that's just not true with respect to how the biases and the oppression show up in America specifically. And so um, I welcome this journey with all of us to explore this, even though it's not part of our 6 initiatives, that it is a crisis that we're in right now, that we should, as we learn, pass it along, invite speakers. So if that gets fit in with everything else we're doing, if you run across folks who want to come and bring their story and share so that we can all grow, I think that this is the time to welcome it for sure. Excellent. And Sara, I really appreciate also what you said about the femicide versus racism. When does a crime like this not have hate attached? That is
Yep.
a whole
That was
seminar
my whole
altogether.
thing. That was everything that hit me. Was that how do you disconnect these two things?
When is hate not attached?
Yeah.
And that's true of any assault on humanity or murder. When is hate not attached? There has to be something there. So, given that, if everybody is checked in and we're all good, let's go into the debrief. So, a couple weeks ago, we watched the W. Kamau Bell documentary on reparations.
Did everybody get to see that? Did it go up on the Facebook?
It did
Because
not
I
finish
made a
loading
copy.
and I didn't realize it. It is now up, but it had not finished. Well, actually, it's not on the Facebook. I thought it had loaded on the YouTube and it had not fully finished. So when I pasted the link in Facebook, it didn't take. So it is in process now. However, I think
I just wonder if when because that's a copyrighted show from CNN, if it's gonna get blocked once it goes to YouTube and or
I did it again just to see if maybe that was the situation.
I just I actually took it and copied it and put it up on my Google Drive, which I just put the link in.
Okay, thank you, Tom.
So that's not something that ought to be shared in some public way because it'll get killed.
It can
But
it can
for
be shared
anybody,
on our email, right?
correct.
Okay.
Paula, may I just take a moment to thank my comrade at arms, or my compatriot in reparations, Tom, for just, presenting our research and, just, and finding the film, presenting the film, just doing the whole reparations extravaganza when I couldn't be there. So Tom, I heard you did magnificently and I really appreciate it. And
I
I'm
have the
sorry.
easy part. You did all the work. I just had to take credit for it.
Not true. Thanks.
Okay. So for the fetish size over here, that will be you, Tatiana. Let's start.
Is that what I've done? Oh my God.
No, that's called a crush girl.
Say it like that. I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably true.
All of us have it with Van Jones mostly. We
Yeah.
all have our people.
Yeah.
I love the time when you couldn't remember Van Jones's name and you were like, the cute one. I'm like, Van Jones.
That, what she said.
Okay, wait, what am I doing? Is it now time for my little mini report?
No, we are reflecting on the movie.
Oh, okay. Oh, did you like I tried to get right over your question?
I would have been confused by that as well.
I loved it. And not just because of the thing. He just gets himself into so many incredible situations, like going for the walk with the guy who was in Spike Lee's film, who showed him where the school was, and just it was just such a perfect. It was, I don't even know, it was like a minute or something, and it just told so much in that short amount of time. That's some crazy smarts right there. And then also I really loved his conversation with the people in the bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
And when all the people were kind of coming in, and just like hanging out and just being there with the community and the community opening up. I loved that. I loved hearing that. And then I'm sorry, should I stop? Because probably.
No, you're great.
The part where he interviews the woman, and I'm blanking on the name, who was slightly controversial, well, kind of actually controversial.
Yvette Carnell.
Right.
My favorite.
Yeah. So, what she said, because I didn't know her. So then it made me go look her up and then look up the organization. And then I was just like, wow, he is so skilled as an interview person to get, first of all, to even get a meeting. And I don't know. I was struck and I appreciated that segment.
I loved the fact that in that segment he did that thing. He says, "People said if Yvette's going to be there, I can't be there," and he goes, "Well, should I be here?" and it just totally broke her up, and it just.
Well, she's been the controversial one that we've been talking about this whole time, and what's on the table. And the thing that I found very interesting was that she was like Linda said, she's very clear. Who are we talking about? What are we paying? And who's in and who's out? And I could see the need for that in order for it to actually happen. And at the same time, I am also reckoning with my own perspective taking, where I'm just like, well, what about this story? And what about that story? And what about this story? And how does that all fit? And what's fair? And so I'm still struggling with that part of it, even though I get her logic.
What I thought of in that section, especially where it was talking about the American descendants of slaves, the sense that there was all this brouhaha about the fact that Kamala isn't African American because her father was from Jamaica. It's like, well, how the fuck do you think he got to Jamaica? And so I responded to that like, okay, so if there are these other people who have come here and, as Kamau said, have been subjected in years since, they were also subjected to the slavery aspect, just not in our particular territory yet.
Yeah.
And I thought it's interesting.
It's a whole ball of wax. Yeah. And then there were a couple of other things that stood out for me that I wrote down, but I can't find that particular book where I wrote them. But I think in the end, I did feel like who was the older gentleman who was, I think he was a congressman, or I can't remember. He was an older gentleman who had been working on HR 40 for a while, like for years.
Carruthers?
It may
He's
have,
well, I don't think Carruthers he's the one that introduced the bill in 1989. I don't think he's
no,
still.
there was somebody who is older and who was active, and I don't know if they were from Louisiana or if they were from a different state, but they were talking about why it was necessary. It was a small clip at the very beginning. I don't recall. However, it was interesting the path that the idea has come from, and then looking at the small, things that have happened with each individual city, state, what have you, the things that are going on, and what people are proposing as reparations, which is very different from what ADOS is proposing. Like, other people are thinking outside of the box when it comes to reparations with regards to, does this mean that we're forgiving all of the student loans, or does this mean that we are giving free tuition going forward? And inevitably somebody or some bodies are left out of the equation, depending on the out of the box thinking. So was there anything that came up for you in looking at that, or even just thinking about it, even if you haven't looked at the documentary, about who gets a seat at the table for reparations?
I had been, because I've heard the ADOS thing brought up by people who are kind of inflammatory and rigid and stuff before, and I didn't see the Kamau Bell thing because I'd had that problem with the sound. So I had kind of had an instinctive negative reaction to the ADOS thing, but then when Linda explained it, I'm like, that's all making sense. That's all making sense. And then the idea of, if you're doing tuition forgiveness, or free tuition or whatever, there's, as the daughter of someone who immigrated here as an adult, I know that people who immigrate other than like fleeing across the border on foot are generally like a relatively specific chunk of people that had enough money for plane fare and et cetera, student visa or et cetera. So I feel like, so my experience is that there, people who are immigrants who were able to fly in from another country, et cetera, more often come from relatively wealthy or privileged backgrounds in their own country, come from educated people, have an expectation that they are going to go to university and stuff, and the idea of forgiving student loans, or even free college tuition seems like it could more benefit people whose families recently arrived in the US than people who have had the general generational trauma and dealing with racism on an ongoing basis. Because like my ex-husband who came from Peru did not deal with, there's colorism in Peru, but he was not on the dark skinned side of the equation there. So coming here, or for his siblings moving to Europe, they experienced racism and being stereotyped in a different way than they had in their country. And I think being the fifth generation of being told that you are worth less than everybody else and not seeing your people who look like you as your teacher, your doctor, your president, etc., is a whole different experience than having parents who chose to come here to make a better life and had resources to come here and education and stuff. So um
And
so the idea of
for
first,
clarity, I was meaning specifically Black people, not people from other countries.
oh yeah, no, I mean that too, but like I work with a lot of doctors who are from Nigeria themselves, or their parents are from Nigeria, and it's much more common for me than physicians who are American descendants of slaves. So I would worry about a kind of reparation that might benefit the people who are not as oppressed first. And I really think coming from a country where you aren't in a racial minority makes a huge difference to how you to your physical and mental health and confidence and et cetera, et cetera. I think I don't say, oh, Kamala Harris isn't African American. It's like she dealt with being African American in childhood and in school and et cetera, et cetera. But she is not coming from generations of trauma of having experienced Jim Crow here and stuff. Probably generations of trauma in India and Jamaica, but
And therein lies the problem, is that she doesn't get to not experience the systemic oppression of America once she presents as Black once arriving here, which is very different than, I feel like, and this is an ongoing conversation that's happening within the Black community, and we need to switch over real quick, is that the this thing that's happening between African communities versus African American communities, um, and how we accept each other on an intellectual, socioeconomic, separatist sort of basis. And so that's a big conversation that's going on in the African/African American community. So interesting to note, and thank you for pointing that out, Sarah. We'll need to revisit that again. Um, Fiona, and then we do need at least one quick update on Sara before we leave.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? I could talk for a good 15 or more minutes or an hour. I have a lot of thoughts, but I'll save it for another time.
Well, Linda and Tom are going to be laying this out on a roadmap, so maybe we can bring this back for another conversation, and then that maybe will help us to shape the directions in which we want to go. Excellent.
All of that is assuming that I can keep up with Linda on running down the road.
Oh, come on.
We're
Tom.
all trying to keep up with Linda. Fiona, could you write it down, please, so you don't forget it? And then I would like to shift us really quickly because we were supposed to have updates. And I know Tatiana has a quick update, but then Sara also has a big update that's coming up because we have some dates set up. Sara, can you go ahead and dive in?
so I've been wanting to do a community forum town hall kind of thing on Zoom or Facebook Live with African American health providers talking about, and Paula was great coming up with the title of Should I Trust the Vaccine? And we have agreed, and hopefully still agreed, because the powers that be at Glide are busy giving birth to an entire new organization and church, and so Dr. Anna Bennett, who's the head of the Department of Public Health's Equity Department, and Dr. Margarita Lightfoot from UCSF, Associate Professor of Medicine, et cetera, are have agreed to speak, and hopefully haven't given up on us, because we haven't given them the firm date and time yet. And then Bernadette Williams from Glide is going to speak like as a community member who is mistrustful of the virus, and then the process that she went through to decide about it. And Ayana is going to talk also about vaccine access and where it's available for who. And I'm trying to figure out how much I can ask them ahead of time to address different points and stuff. And I'm like, well, I better just jump in and say what it is that we want, rather than, oh, do whatever you think is best. And then the time, Perry put it as 7, but I wasn't sure if that might be late to start. And I think she was partly doing that so we could have our 5 to 6 racial justice and then a break. So that's a question for you, Paula. And
We
then
don't need our 5 to 6. Anytime we do a panel, it will take place of our thing and then go later.
And then I was wondering if we should say 6 to 7:30. It's like, I don't know if we might have a whole hour and a half of content so that people would have time to ask questions.
I can't imagine that we wouldn't have a whole hour and a half of
Yeah,
content.
we would need at least an hour and a half.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't like the idea of starting at 7 and doing an hour and a half, because I don't know who has kids they've got to get into bed or anything.
Yeah, the forums that I go to that start at 7 are a bit much. People start popping off at 8.
Yeah, so do you want to say that we could suggest 6 or 6:30 and have it be a 90-minute thing, since the letter hasn't quite gone out yet?
6?
How did can we not just do 5 to 6:30? Or do we need
Wait.
our regular session? No, yes?
Is 5 too early for people that don't come to us? That's
Oh, I see.
Yeah, no,
That's what
these
comes
are,
to my mind.
yeah, I think 5 is too early for health professionals to be off work to do a talk.
Okay, gotcha, sorry.
Yes, that sounds good to me. 6 to 7:30.
Okay, I'm going to ask Perry to do that.
And that's supposed to be April
6th, I think, if that's a Tuesday.
6th or
Yes,
7th.
it is a Tuesday.
Yeah.
All right. So then now that we have that all nailed down, the next phase is getting community partners. And so the other piece is sending out the invitations to the other, like all the Black churches, all the LGBTQ centers, any of the marginalized communities, to see if they want to partner with us to bring on their people to also view in tandem, so that we get an awareness out that this is happening, so that it's not just impacting the Glide community, but it's impacting all BIPOC communities and beyond. And then, is there anything else, Sara? I think Perry and Mark are taking care of all of the tech logistics, so we just need to get the tech thing and push it out. And then, Sara, are you mediating or am I mediating?
You're mediating. I'm trying to be invisible.
She's the behind the scenes. Okay, so then there's that. So then I feel like we have a program. This is what, our 3rd, 4th? Yay!
I'm sorry though, Sara. The only person who's allowed to be invisible is Perry.
Oh,
And we don't like that she does that, by the way, but
Thank you, Rebecca. And then Tatiana, did you want to go ahead and dive in with your update?
Do people need to go? We can do it next time.
You want to do it next time?
Yeah. But if you wanted to talk to Kenneth Kim, I just wanted to give a plug. We had a great call with him, and Linda and I are going to talk to Wes Saver at the Center for Social Justice. We have that call, so we'll have even more to report next time.
We're finding our rhythm with Kenneth. They did send us that invitation to come and participate in the Prop C thing. I did go with my best Gay by Men's backpack giveaway, and I was like, "Oh, we could do 300 bags in like an hour. We got this." And we did do 300 bags.
I was really sorry to not be there because I really wanted to do that.
It was totally fine. It was 3 people that were from the volunteer center and programs, and then myself, and we set up an assembly line, and it went just fine. So it worked out. You know, we had our presence in there, and then I'm not sure if anybody was able to show up on the Thursday event, but it looked like it went really well. So that's another thing. So
Thank you, Paula, for representing us. Always.
It was good. It was good. It was good to actually be back in the church. So
that was one of the reasons I wanted to be there, just to be there.
I know, and it was so hard not to hug people. So hard. So hard. So all right. So then I'm putting I am tabling Tatiana till next time. Rebecca, we hope we see you again. We hope this has been fulfilling for you in some ways. And then everybody just go out with the intention, I hope, that tomorrow is different and it could be better. And take care of yourself, self-care at the top of the list.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you all.
Thank you,
All right, take care.
Paula. Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Blessings.
Oh, hold on.
What?
What is happening?